more than 600 stores, a national liquor distribution arm, a warehouse membership chain, a seat on the board of one of the biggest Philippines' own banks. That is the empire Bea Alonzo married into on July 13th, inside Makati City Hall, in a private ceremony with 3 witnesses and no press release. The groom, in a plain white barong, carries the title President of Puregold Price Club. Most headlines called him simply Bea's husband. Join us as we walk through exactly what she married into and the number this empire adds up to by the end. The wedding Manila couldn't stop talking about. The ceremony itself lasted minutes. On July 13th, Bea Alonzo and Ferdinand Vincent Co exchanged vows in a private civil ceremony at Makati City Hall, officiated personally by Makati Mayor Nancy Binay. The venue itself was a government office building rather than any hotel ballroom or private estate, a deliberately modest choice for a family that could easily have afforded either. Binay confirmed it herself the next day on Facebook, writing simply that she had already married them, before the couple's own confirmation followed a day later. Alonzo posted a set of black and white photographs on July 15th showing the pair signing documents, exchanging rings, and posing beside a small cake reading "Just Married," captioned with a single word, home. She later said she had done her own makeup that day and that a close friend had taken the photos, a level of privacy unusual for one of the most photographed actresses in the country. The couple had actually planned something far larger only months earlier. Marriage bans for the two were read publicly at St. Peter, the Apostle Parish in Manila on March 8th, with a source close to the family telling reporters that whichever woman married Vincent would count herself fortunate, describing him as remarkably kind. Sources at the time pointed to a destination wedding planned for May inside the Co family's own vineyard in Spain, a celebration that never happened, one that had reportedly already involved vendor bookings and guest coordination before it was scrapped entirely. The Spain wedding was reportedly called off over unresolved issues involving the couple's prenuptial agreement, and what followed instead was a wedding so quiet that neither family's parents were confirmed to have attended the actual ceremony, with reports only confirming a handful of close friends stood as witnesses. A woman known across the Philippines for headlining some of the country's biggest films had just married almost invisibly, trading a planned Andalusian vineyard ceremony for a signature inside a government office, a contrast that alone was enough to keep the story trending for days after the photos went up. The obvious question is not whether the wedding was small. It is who exactly she married once the cameras stopped following the story of a canceled Spanish vineyard wedding and started asking who this quiet groom actually was, and why his own family had been so successful at keeping that answer out of the entertainment pages for as long as they had. Who did she actually marry? Ferdinand Vincent Co is not a household name in the Philippines, and that appears to be exactly how he prefers it. Born in July 1980, he is the eldest son and only son of Lucio and Susan Co, a husband and wife duo whose combined net worth was estimated at $2.3 billion as of 2024, placing them among Forbes' Philippines 50 richest that same year. A list dominated almost entirely by shopping mall developers, banking families, and manufacturing conglomerates rather than anyone with a direct connection to Philippine show business. Vincent himself has spent more than 2 decades working almost entirely out of public view, quietly building a track record inside the family business rather than cultivating any personal media presence, giving interviews rarely if at all, and appearing in local coverage mainly through corporate filings and stock exchange disclosures rather than lifestyle features. Reporters covering the courtship first traced his identity through a screenshot of an Instagram photo taken on a beach in Andalusia, Spain, in April 2025, a beach neither he nor Alonzo confirmed publicly until months later, an identification made entirely by fans piecing together travel dates rather than any official announcement from either side. Their first confirmed public appearance together came at a Puregold event at the World Trade Center in Pasay City in early 2025, where fans noticed Alonzo cheering him on from the crowd months before either side confirmed a relationship. He carries the title of president and director of Puregold Price Club, the retail chain most Filipino households already shop inside without necessarily connecting the name to a specific family behind the storefront. Insider reports covering the relationship placed the total value of the Co family's combined business holdings at approximately 175 billion pesos, a figure that covers far more than groceries, and one that placed Vincent's own family fortune in a category few of Alonzo's previous public relationships had ever approached. To understand where that number actually comes from, and why Vincent himself carries the title president rather than founder, the story has to start on the sales floor of a single Puregold branch in Cubao, more than 20 years before Makati City Hall ever entered the picture, back when nobody working alongside him had any reason to guess where the family name would eventually lead. The man from the store floor. Vincent graduated from the University of Asia and the Pacific in 2003 with a degree in entrepreneurial management, and that same year he joined Puregold's board of directors while simultaneously starting at the bottom as store manager of the company's Cubao branch, a dual position that put him inside boardroom discussions in the morning and running a single supermarket floor in the afternoon. He was not handed an executive suite despite his last name. He moved next to manage the Commonwealth branch for 3 years, learning the same inventory counts, staffing schedules, and daily shrinkage reports any Puregold branch manager across the country dealt with regardless of whose name was on the incorporation papers, before training abroad at Procter & Gamble's Singapore office in 2007 to gain corporate experience outside his own family's company. This was a deliberate detour that exposed him to a multinational consumer goods company's management practices before he ever returned to run any part of Puregold himself. He returned to head Puregold's merchandising division, the department responsible for deciding exactly which products filled hundreds of stores and at what price, working closely with senior executives to expand the chain's retail network before finally being elected president of Puregold Price Club Incorporated on May 12, 2015, 12 years after he first punched in as a branch manager, a timeline that put roughly a decade of hands-on operational experience between his university graduation and the day his own name appeared at the top of the company's leadership chart. Under his leadership, the company posted record profits of 10.4 billion pesos in 2024 on revenue of roughly 220 billion pesos, with Puregold's own stock market valuation reaching 92 billion pesos. His name now appears as president or chairman across more than a dozen affiliated companies beyond the supermarket chain itself, a portfolio built gradually over 2 decades rather than inherited all at once on a single signing day. Colleagues who worked alongside him during those branch manager years have described a man who insisted on walking the sales floor personally rather than reviewing numbers from a head office, a habit that stuck with him even after his own title changed from store manager to president of the entire company. None of that explains the other half of the number insiders were quoting, because Vincent's own title as president of one supermarket chain is only the visible layer of a business empire his parents built from almost nothing during a financial crisis that ruined plenty of other Filipino businesses at the exact same time. The empire Puregold built. Lucio Co was born in 1956 in Manila to parents who ran Atlantic Glassware, a wholesale shop in the Divisoria Trading District, the kind of commerce most future billionaires in Manila's Chinese-Filipino business community actually start inside, learning how to move volume at thin margins long before he ever touched a supermarket aisle. Co spent his early career in oil and gas exploration, running a company called Alcorn Gold Resources, before the 1997 Asian financial crisis pushed him to pivot entirely into retail, betting that Filipino consumers squeezed by the crisis would flock to a hypermarket selling goods cheaper than the market leader at the time, SM. A dominant player Co had no obvious way of beating on scale alone. On September 8, 1998, Lucio and his wife Susan incorporated Puregold Price Club, opening their first branch that December along Shaw Boulevard in Mandaluyong, a single store betting an entire company's future on undercutting an established competitor during the worst regional downturn in a generation, a decision made partly to protect the jobs of employees at Co's own duty-free store in Clark, Pampanga, whose finances the retail pivot was originally meant to help stabilize. That original Shaw Boulevard branch still stands today as Puregold's flagship store, a sprawling warehouse-style building with wide concrete aisles built for pallet loads rather than shopping baskets. It is sitting a short walk from the company's own corporate headquarters tower that now oversees the entire 600-store network from that same stretch of Mandaluyong. That is the same neighborhood where the very first cash register once rang up the company's opening day sales. The bet paid off far beyond either founder's own expectations. By 2019, the chain had grown to 229 hypermarkets, 102 supermarkets, and dozens of additional store formats nationwide, and Puregold's stock price alone climbed to nearly 4 times its original IPO value by 2020. A rare Philippine retail success story that survived not just the 1997 crisis, but every downturn since. Today, the company runs more than 600 stores across the Philippines, still anchored on the same low-cost promise that carried it through the crisis that built it. Lucio Co's own personal net worth was estimated at $1.57 billion as of 2026, a figure that reflects only his direct stake and not the family's wider combined holdings across every affiliated company bearing the Co name. Susan Co, meanwhile, has held her own board seat since day one, rather than functioning as a silent co-founder in name only. A partnership that put both spouses' names on the original 1998 incorporation papers and kept both of them active in company decisions for the following 2.5 decades. What almost nobody watching the wedding headlines realized is that Puregold itself, despite being the name recognized by every Filipino shopper, is only the entry point into a business network that Lucio Co has spent more than 3 decades quietly assembling piece by piece. The part of this story that turns a supermarket president's title into a fortune worth billions of dollars once every subsidiary gets counted. Beyond the supermarket. In 2012, the Co family fully folded S&R membership shopping into its holding structure for more than 16.5 billion pesos after Lucio Co first acquired the warehouse chain from its previous owners back in 2006, a warehouse club modeled directly on American bulk buying chains and aimed squarely at wealthier shoppers. Puregold's own value pricing was never designed to attract. Its flagship branches run on the same footprint as an American Costco. Cavernous warehouse floors stacked with pallet-sized bulk goods, imported cheeses, and rotisserie chicken counters that draw weekend crowds large enough to require their own parking attendants. It's a physical shopping experience deliberately unlike anything else Puregold itself offers. Some analysts covering the deal at the time questioned whether Co had overpaid, a doubt that faded once S&R gave the family access to an entirely different income bracket of Filipino shoppers under one roof, capturing both ends of the retail market with 2 separately branded chains rather than trying to stretch one brand across every income level at once. That single acquisition sits inside a much larger holding structure. Costco Capital, the family's listed investment company, originally began life exploring oil and mineral deposits under a different name before Lucio Co transformed it into the umbrella that now controls Puregold, S&R, and a growing list of unrelated ventures. It is a holding company valued at roughly 43 billion pesos on its own, separate entirely from Puregold's own 92 billion peso market valuation. Under that same umbrella sits the Keepers, the country's largest distributor of imported spirits, Nation Realty, the mall development arm behind the 999 shopping mall in Binondo, Alcorn Petroleum and Minerals, still exploring oil reserves in Palawan decades after Lucio's original career in that same industry, and Office Warehouse, a chain built entirely around office and school supplies that most Filipino parents have shopped at without ever connecting it to a supermarket brand. The 999 shopping mall itself sits in the heart of Manila's Chinatown, a multi-level retail complex built specifically around the wholesale and bargain shopping culture of Divisoria. That is the same trading district where Lucio Co's own parents once ran a small glassware stall decades before their son controlled an entire mall built over that same ground. Its narrow escalators and packed stalls are still echoing the exact kind of commerce the family started generations earlier. Lucio Co's reach extends into banking as well, where company disclosures list him as a director of the Philippine Bank of Communications, giving the family a direct seat inside one of the country's own listed banks alongside its retail holdings, a position that puts Co inside boardroom discussions over lending and deposits, in addition to every conversation about shelf space and supply chains across his own stores. Vincent's own name appears as president or director across dozens of these related entities. These range from premier wine and spirits to real estate arms most Filipino consumers have never heard of, despite regularly buying something connected to one of them. It is a paper trail of company registrations that reads less like a single-family business and more like an entire sector of the Philippine economy. By the time analysts finish adding every subsidiary together, the family's own diversified holdings, spanning groceries, warehouse retail, liquor distribution, real estate, energy exploration, and a stake in banking. Not the single supermarket chain most people associate with the Co name, are what actually produce a number large enough to make a private civil wedding at Makati City Hall into national news. The sisters and the family machine. Vincent is not running this empire alone, and he was never positioned to. His mother, Susan Co, served as vice chairman of Puregold from the company's founding in 1998 before being elected chairman herself in 2023. The same year, Lucio stepped back from that specific role after running it since incorporation, a quiet handover that barely registered outside financial disclosures at the time. Vincent's eldest sister, Pamela Justine Co, has served as Puregold's executive director since 2015, the same year her brother became president, after graduating from Thames International School with a degree in entrepreneurship and working her way through the family business since 2003, meaning both eldest children reached senior leadership positions in the same calendar year after building their own separate track records inside the company. Two younger sisters, Camille Clarice and Katrina Marie, hold their own stakes in executive roles across other co-family ventures, both of them named alongside their siblings as shareholders in the wider Puregold family group according to biographical profiles of the family, with Camille specifically active in ventures including VFC Land Resources, S&R Pizza, and KMC Realty Corp, companies most Filipino consumers would never guess share a bloodline with the supermarket down the street. Corporate disclosures across the wider Costco capital structure list dozens of additional directors and officers beyond the immediate family. This is a governance layer that runs the day-to-day operations while every major strategic decision still appears to route back through Lucio, Susan, and their 4 children. It is, in practice, a family-owned conglomerate run almost entirely by the 4 co-children under their parents' direction, a structure Forbes itself has tracked for years as one of the more concentrated family-run fortunes on its Philippines rich list, with outside executives filling operational roles beneath them rather than sitting above the family at the boardroom table. A pattern common among the country's Chinese-Filipino business dynasties, but rarely documented in this much public detail before a wedding forced the family's name into entertainment coverage rather than business pages. Lucio and Susan Co ranked 9th on Forbes' list of the Philippines' 50 richest in 2024, a ranking built almost entirely on a retail and holdings empire their own 4 children now run day-to-day. While the founders themselves have quietly stepped back into supervisory roles, a generational handover. Tatler's own coverage of Lucio Co has described as a deliberate, gradual transition rather than a sudden retirement, one that had already been years in the making by the time Vincent's own wedding made national headlines for reasons that had nothing to do with retail at all. What this marriage actually means. Bea Alonzo did not marry into money from a position of having none of her own. Across more than 2 decades in Philippine film and television, Alonzo built a career spanning box office hits like One More Chance, The Mistress, and 4 Sisters and a Wedding, roles that made her one of the most bankable leading ladies of her generation rather than a supporting figure riding on anyone else's fame. She has been publicly recognized as one of the wealthier Filipino actors working today, alongside her recognition as a top individual taxpayer in her own profession, a status reserved for entertainers earning well beyond ordinary showbiz income and confirming that her own finances were never dependent on whoever she eventually married. It's a fact worth stating plainly, given how quickly online commentary tends to frame any actress marrying wealth as marrying up rather than simply marrying across. The couple's own romance had already been tracked for more than a year before the wedding, with early sightings placing them together at a Puregold event at the World Trade Center in Pasay City in early 2025, long before either side confirmed anything publicly. A slow build that let both of them avoid the kind of tabloid frenzy a public announcement from day one would have guaranteed. What her marriage to Vincent Co actually represents is not a rescue narrative, but a merger of two separate kinds of Filipino wealth that rarely overlap this directly. A pairing entertainment outlets covering the courtship repeatedly framed as a blend of star power and quiet sophistication rather than the usual celebrity romance narrative. A leading actress with her own independent earning power marrying into a retail dynasty that most Filipinos interact with every single week without ever learning the family name attached to it. The wedding itself stayed small on purpose. 3 witnesses, 1 mayor, no entourage, the opposite of the vineyard ceremony in Spain that was originally planned for the last week of March or first week of April before being quietly abandoned over a prenuptial dispute that never fully made it into public reporting beyond a handful of unnamed sources. What outlasted the small ceremony is the actual scale of what Bea Alonzo signed her name into that afternoon. A family whose supermarkets, warehouse clubs, liquor distribution, real estate, banking interests, and energy holdings touch a meaningful share of the Philippine economy every single day, run not by the low-profile couple who built it from a single Mandaluyong storefront, but by their 4 children, with her new husband sitting at the head of the table. Even in the months surrounding the wedding itself, the family's holding company was reportedly closing a separate deal to fully acquire Prime Water, a private water utility, a reminder that the Co family's deal-making had not slowed down for a single news cycle, wedding included. Add up the supermarkets, the warehouse clubs, the liquor distribution, the mall developments, the oil exploration, and the bank directorship. And insiders tracking the family's full combined holdings landed on a number close to 175 billion pesos, more than $3 billion, built from a single Mandaluyong storefront during a financial crisis that ruined plenty of other Filipino businesses at the exact same time. Bea Alonzo signed 1 marriage certificate that afternoon and stepped into all of it at once, from a warehouse floor in Mandaluyong to a mall built over her new in-laws' own childhood trading district in Binondo. Which part of the Co family fortune surprised you the most? The empire itself, or how quietly Vincent built his own place inside it? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to her status for the next fortune hiding behind a familiar name.